Joining me this week, a wonderful friend of mine. We met years ago in New York and been able to keep in touch and cross paths. I don't cross paths with him near enough, but when I do, it's always a wonderful time. He is from Ad Free Shows and Inside the Ropes. Dominic DeAngelo. Follow him on X. I got to get used to saying that, at Dominic DeAngelo. Dom, it's good to talk to you, man.
Stu, it's good to see you, man. Bittersweet circumstances today, but it's always a pleasure. But I wouldn't rather have it with you, a Texas-born man here, and to talk about little Terry Funk as well as All In today. So thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll get to All In coming up this weekend, but yeah, the news broke today. Actually, it broke just a few hours ago that Terry Funk, one of the most beloved individuals, not to mention one of the greatest to ever be in the ring, passed away at the age of 79. And he's been battling illnesses for quite some time. Terry Funk, former NWA World Heavyweight Champion, former ECW World Champion. He is in, I think, every Hall of Fame that there is. WWE, NWA, WCW, Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame, International Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame. If there is a Hall of Fame, he's in it. So, Dom, you actually got to know him. Just talk for a moment about your experience getting to know the Funker.
Yeah, absolutely. It was pretty wild circumstances, to be honest. I read his book in 2020 or 2019. I can't remember, but after it, I searched high and low, and I was like, man, it would be so awesome to interview Terry Funk. And I was searching high and lows for his number, trying to see how I could contact him, what I could do, reaching out to emails. Finally, I reached out to Dave Meltzer, and I wrote like this whole War and Peace letter about like why I wanted to interview Terry Funk. And then I got an email back at just simply one phone number. That was it that Dave Meltzer sent me. It was just one phone number. So I called. I was on my back porch here, and I remember it was like a summer night, and sure enough, Terry Funk answers, and I'm chatting him up, and I'm like a little flabbergasted at this point, still relatively early in my career with journalism and wrestling journalism and stuff, and so. But I was like, I'd love to interview you, and he's like, all right, yeah, I'll interview you. You can talk to me. And so we set up a date. He wrote it down, and then I remember I'm sitting pretty much where I am right now with you here, and like get on the phone with him, and he's affable and like very like talked about his book. We talked about his book, and so after the interview was over, it went about 45 minutes, and he was like, hey, keep in touch. I like talking to you. And I was like, okay. So every couple of weeks, I would call Terry Funk, and we would just BS. And we kept in touch for a year and a half about every four. Sometimes I would call him. I'd leave a message for him. Terry, it's Dom. Just checking in, seeing how you're doing, blah, blah, blah. And then once in a while, I'd just get a phone call from Terry. And like he would, sometimes he would get my voicemail and leave me a voicemail. He's like, hey, it's Dominic, it's Terry, just checking in on you and all that stuff. And then, well, the winter story here is it was COVID. It was in the thick of COVID going down. And you guys down in Texas, the grid was frozen. Mm-hmm. And I must have called Terry, or he might have called me. I can't remember. But I remember he's driving. He's like, oh, I'm driving. He's like, it's a snowstorm down here. It's going crazy. And I was like, geez, Terry, be careful. And he's like, man, Dominic, you might be making history because you might be the last man to ever speak to Terry Funk.
Oh, my Lord.
And so,
not to mention snowing in Amarillo. I mean, it's hard enough to believe snowing in Austin, but yeah, snowing in Amarillo, that takes something.
I could only imagine. And then, circumstances like Terry and I, we would talk. I watched the Onita death match, and we talked about that. He talked about his dad and him as a kid being a little kid watching his dad wrestle like guys like Pat O'Connor and Stu Hart in their garage, and like pretty fascinating like stories that I would never think. And I've never met him in person, but we would always keep in contact. And then the one day in June of 2022, I was doing my shift at Wrestling Inc. and I got a phone call from him. I missed it, and I was like, oh man, I'll have to call him later. And I called and I left him a voicemail, and then I never heard back. And here his number got changed. He was in assisted living at the time, and so I lost contact with him like over a year ago now. And so I just searched high and low to get the number too, and it just no dice, no dice. It was just a different circumstances changed. His family wanted to be a little more private and all that stuff, so never got to like kind of give him a good send off or anything like that. So it's been tough. I very much appreciate the time and conversations I had with him, but I'll absolutely miss those times too. So
and that's every story you hear about him outside the ring. I mean, first he was phenomenal in the ring, and he could do babyface, he could do heel, he could do it all. But every story you hear about him outside the ring is pretty similar to what you have. Just as pleasant a man as you can imagine, willing to spend a few minutes and talk and chat. And obviously down here we know, I know several folks that worked with him, wrestled him, you just and or he just came, cross paths with him. And he's one of those guys that everybody knew, everybody loved him. You won't find anyone to say an ill will about Terry Funk. Of course, there's the legendary rivalry with Dusty Rhodes down in Florida, and Dustin, in fact, sent out a tweet about it, talking about how he watched his dad and Terry, mix it up back in the day. And you know, and I just it's a sad day in pro wrestling, and then not just Texas wrestling, but all of pro wrestling, because he meant so much to pro wrestling, to the very fabric. I mean, he was the one that legitimized ECW. He put them on the map back in those very early stages when it became Extreme Championship Wrestling, and when Paul Heyman was trying to establish it. He's the one that put him on the map with his rivalries with Cactus Jack and Sandman and Raven and such. If I mean it's got to be near impossible, but give me your, for lack of a better term, summation of his legacy that he has left in pro wrestling.
Well, that is tough, but I think the best way to sum it up is I think he was the greatest all around pro wrestler there was to ever live, and and that's coming from a guy as a kid. Terry Funk was on my radar, but he was not. I was not like a fan of his, or like I was like, oh, Terry Funk, he's just middle aged and crazy, and he's friends with Cactus Jack and Mankind. And so that's how I envisioned him early on. And then once you get to kind of get your nails embedded into the business and like know the ins and outs of the industry and see all that he's done, and you see his ability to play a heel, his ability to play a baby face, his ability to work in the ring, the legitimate background he had as an amateur wrestler and as a pro, like a collegiate football player.
Yep.
And then you look into the aspects of his knowledge for the business, what he had in regards to what you were saying with ECW. I know in WCW too, he had the idea for having cruiserweights, and he wanted to pitch a 1 count for cruiserweights for pinfalls and stuff like that. And then even when I was speaking to him in the later years, I remember him saying the business is going to come back around to a different where like everything is so upfront and in people's faces now about like, hey, this, the curtain's pulled back. He's like, it's got to have to get back to almost an era of legitimacy again, like where it's like believability and what's going on. And so he always had the foresight to see what's ahead. He was 3 steps ahead of the business in a lot of aspects of the ways. And on top of that too, he transcended the business. He laid the groundwork for how to reinvent yourself in pro wrestling. Like you look at what he did in ECW, and then you see the others to follow him, like a Chris Jericho, and those guys that are able to reinvent themselves and reestablish themselves in the industry. Terry Funk was like basically the pioneer in a lot of ways for all that, of how the business changed. So, and he was in all these kind of eras, like, he tagged against Bruno Sammartino. He's done all these other stuff in Japan and stuff like that. And then here he's brought up all the way basically to like the early 2000s, even going a little bit later than that. And so Terry, all around the greatest wrestler ever live. And I think a hard argument could be made for him in that regard.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you mentioned college football. He's from West Texas A&M, which so many Hall of Famers, Ted DiBiase and such, that came through West Texas A&M, and they're a Division II school. Ryan Leaf was head coach there at one time, but yeah, it's hard to imagine pro wrestling without Terry Funk. I mean, we'll try, but like you said, the very fabric of pro wrestling has Terry Funk woven throughout it. So, our thoughts, condolences to the family and the friends of Terry Funk, the wrestling world. It's kind of ironic. I'm heading to the Cauliflower Alley Club next week. I gotta imagine I'm gonna hear a lot of Terry Funk stories there, with everybody that worked with him, all those legends that convene in Las Vegas every year. So it should be interesting. I'm hoping I'll get to talk to a few of those individuals, maybe get some good Terry Funk stories. But yeah, hope he, again, just a sad day in pro wrestling. Let's get to AEW All In. That's coming up this Sunday. It is an early start time because it is in London at Wembley Stadium, 1 p.m. Eastern, noon Central. 0 hour starts 1 hour prior. Of course, it's available on Bleacher Report in the United States, and it's available Fight TV, DAZN, and several other platforms, outside the United States. You and I were on the media call yesterday with Tony Khan, the AEW CEO and owner, and he had mentioned that there were going to be changes to the card, but he's going to keep the spirit. One change that we found out, I think Fightful was the first to report it yesterday. Ray Phoenix was not going to make the trip. It was due to some issues. He's trying to gain citizenship in the United States, and because of some workings with that, he isn't going to travel to the U.S. So they tonight on Dynamite, in fact, about 30 minutes ago, he was in a match with John Moxley. Mox gets the win. Here comes the rest of the Blackpool Combat Club, and Wheeler Yuta hits Ray Phoenix with a crowbar, knocks him out, and then here come the best friends. And then after being gone for over a year, here comes Santana and Ortiz, proud and powerful. So it looks like for that Stadium Stampede match, it's going to be the way it looks right now. Eddie Kingston, the best friends, Chuck Taylor, Trent Beretta, the AEW International Champion Orange Cassidy, and Penta El Cerro taking on the Blackpool Combat Club, and John Moxley, Claudio Castagnoli, the Ring of Honor World Champion, Wheeler Yuta, along with Santana and Ortiz. Give me your thoughts on what has transpired, and that's still going to be just an insane match in Wembley Stadium of all places.
Yeah, pretty cool that Santana and Ortiz are back, because the hubbub, a lot of the reporting and stuff like that is what you've heard. I think even Conan has said that there was tension between those two in regards to their relationship and all that stuff. And so it's good to see that they're able to work together. And because, I mean, honestly, Proud and Powerful, Santana Ortiz, LAX, however you want to label them, they're have been one of the best tag teams, I think, of this decade. And I don't think I'm mincing a whole lot of words when I say that either, because they were one of the early teams in AEW, and then you kind of seen before Santana got hurt and before that split kind of happened, Santana was catching fire as a singles competitor almost. Things were really picking up for him. So it's unfortunate Phoenix could not be there, but what kind of a blessing in disguise in a roundabout way to have those guys be able to come in and substitute in for that, because I mean, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And if, they can kind of pick up where they last left off, whether that's from a singles competition or back in a tag, because I mean, the landscape is always changing in AEW when it comes to the tag division. So there's opportunity for them for sure. So putting them into the match, a wild match, like, Stadium CMP, we've seen it during the COVID era and as a means of almost a cinematic match. So how they will execute it in Wembley, such a huge soccer stadium, football stadium, it's going to be a spectacle and a half. It'll be interesting to see how it gets presented and everything like that. I think that's part of the big intrigue of Wembley overall, is going to be the atmosphere. You look at like WrestleMania Backlash or Backlash in Puerto Rico, boom, the crowd was almost the star of that whole show in a lot of ways. So it'll be very neat to see how they kind of lay this match out in particular. A lot of competitors in it. That's going to be something that they're going to have to make the adjustments for. But overall, hey, probably a good match to have at this place.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be, I mean, the background of Wembley there with the insanity of a stadium stampede match, it's going to lend itself to such, some incredible spots. And we'll see who comes out on top. Should be interesting. Right now we have one match on 0 Hour, but it's a biggie, as MJF and Adam Cole, who will face each other in the main event, are going to team together to challenge Aussie Open for the Ring of Honor World Tag Team Championships. I know there are arguments on both sides as far as whether MJF and Adam Cole should win the titles. There's also the theories about, is that when one of them turns on another one to set up the main event? I don't think so. I think Aussie Open retains, but there's enough of, I guess, some doubt to say, what if? Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, initially, like, just thinking about it, I would say that they could make a real good story out of them both winning the titles. But you could do it either way too. Like, if they lose it, there's intrigue there. I think the atmosphere of these two matches end capping the show in a lot of ways is very intriguing. Like, I know Eric Bischoff, I think, had some criticism in regard to, like, hey, you're putting your two stars on the opening pre-match show of the card. And I definitely see that point, where it's like, oh man, you want to save those stars for the end of the show, like, boom, like, end it. You don't want to, it's almost like a wedding. You don't want to see the bride and groom, like, before it gets to that point. So I do understand that. But I mean, it really depends on how they execute it all overall. If I had to make a prediction on it, I would like to say I think MJF and Adam Cole win the titles, because then whatever you have decide happen in the main event, whether there's tension or sportsmanship at the end, that friendship is still intact, or if it isn't, it's going to be intriguing for them to have those tag titles, whether they're friends or not. So if I had to make a prediction, I think I would say that MJF and Cole win.
Okay. Let's jump to the main event. Let's jump at MJF defending the AEW World Title against Adam Cole. All right, there has been a lot of speculation about who, if someone's going to turn, who turns on who. I think the conventional thinking would be MJF, because he's the devil.
You're right.
But there has been some chatter, about Adam Cole turning heel. He knows how to be a heel. About Adam Cole turning on MJF. And so MJF becomes a big-time babyface. Let me ask you, if you had to bet it, who turns on who?
Wow.
And it would depend on who wins the title.
Yeah, I would think so. I want to say that MJF is going to stay the heel. And my reasoning might be just because, for the simple fact, you're in this is like an historic making event here that's going on. And so you want almost, I don't think you want a big heel swerve happening at the close the show out necessarily. I think almost like you want to, hey, this is the era of, if Adam Cole wins, and that's the era of Adam Cole as a babyface champion thing going on. And then you can cultivate a story with MJF being, they have the titles together, but then they also, there's that animosity where MJF is like, I don't know if I'm so much friends with him anymore. So, and I think, it really, I don't know if it's an MJF's intent, but you got to think about over the course of his career in AEW, how many times has he acted like a good guy and best buddies with somebody, and then he just turns on him. And I think it's almost like this thing, maybe with him, where it's like, I want to see how far I can push this crowd and to keep believing that I'm actually a good guy, that people actually like me, and that I am in their corner. They finally turned me. But here, in the grand scheme of it all, I'm still an asshole. And I'm still the devil, and I got you again. The devil got you again. So I want to say Adam Cole wins it clean as a babyface, and then MJF ultimately screws him over at some point.
I tend to agree with you about MJF staying heel.
Mm-hmm.
Devil pops up. How much of a chance do you think there would be where MJF goes heel, he screws Adam Cole out of the title at All In, but because of the circumstances, it sets up a rematch at All Out?
That's a great point too, because when you're saying that, even I'm like, wait, they got All Out the next week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, All
So,
Out 1 week later in Chicago.
And later in Chicago. So you could kind of run that back. And just further the story there, make that the continuation. Now, I guess another question is, like, with an historic thing like that, do you want it to almost be like a stopgap main event for such a big show at Wembley? But that's just, I guess, no matter how Tony Khan perceives it. Well, I'm just continuing the story. Still a big show. Lots that happened here. Who knows what's all set to go down on the card exactly? But, it's definitely something to think about for sure, because, it's just a week away. It's another pay-per-view.
It's and that was something else he talked about on that media call, was trying to book All In and All Out, trying to figure out who's going to be on which show, or both shows, or neither show, or whatever. And that's keeping them up at night. So for the AEW Women's World Title, it's a 4-way match: Karushita, Toni Storm, Saraya, and Britt Baker. If Sheeta had not won the title so recently, it feels like this could be a title change. But Sheeta just won the title a couple weeks ago, so I gotta think they're gonna keep it on her at least for a little while, right?
So I was thinking about this too, Stu, and I was thinking, to be forthright in certain regards, there's how they've handled the certain belts, like the TNT title and stuff. It's been a little, I think Darby Allin said it in the Control Center for Dynamite this week or something, that it's been a real hot potato of a title lately. And it's almost been, I thought when I first read the comments, I was like, wow, these are like shoot comments. He said this in an interview, but here it's like for that, but there's some legitimacy to it. So I could see it being Wembley, it being in the UK. Saraya potentially wins the title here. I don't think that maybe the focus is necessarily on, hey, she just won the title, we got to keep it. Maybe Tony Khan's thinking is like, hey, this makes Kirishita like a multi-time, like several champion. I think this is like her third time winning the title, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe that's kind of her feather in her cap there. And then it kind of does move on here. Maybe Saraya gets the title. And I mean, the work that Toni Storm's been doing in recent weeks as a persona has been great. And so maybe she's going to get reignited too. But I think my pick for this match might be Saraya to win the title.
Okay. That's a very possible choice. Again, being in London, she's it's basically her hometown. That's definitely a possibility. We've got the end of or I guess at least the third match of the trilogy. FTR defending the world tag titles against the Young Bucks. This is another one of those matches. I think it could go either way, and I don't think the crowd will be upset either way it goes, because I think it'll be a Mac Classic. Um, who do you think comes out of London with tag titles?
So I'm with you. I think it can go either way, to be honest. I think it'll be very interesting to see how the crowd reacts to each of the teams. I wonder if how split it's going to be, or like British fans are so passionate, wrestling fans, so like they're gonna wear their emotions on their sleeves. So to be able to see who gets a big reaction, or if it's going to be like an equal reaction for the two of the teams, I think is also an intriguing aspect of this match. But I mean, for this to be the rubber match, all the legacy and history that these two teams have had together, both in the ring and then kind of outside of the ring in certain regards, create so much added intrigue to it. I would almost say, it's almost kind of like when the tag titles first began in AEW, where they did the tournament and the Young Bucks got eliminated in the first round, I believe, by a private party in that tournament. I could almost see the Young Bucks taking that route again here and just giving the rubber match to FTR and having them cement their legacy. I think Matt and Nick are confident enough in themselves that they're like, hey, we're stars. We know our value. We're freaking EVPs too, as well. We just signed major deals. I think they're okay with taking the L here in front of like a packed house, and it almost plays to their benefit in certain ways, because they're like, hey, look, they did, they're able to do business almost, and so
I tend to agree with you. I think FTR retains here. I think it's going to be one of those. It'll be a back and forth, a lot of great moves. It will be one of those matches we remember. I think in the end, FTR retains. I think it'll just be it'll just be a very memorable match. CM Punk is calling himself the real world champion, which, okay. And I'm guessing that we will, somewhere down the road get to CM Punk versus whoever the world champion is, MJF or Adam Cole. In the meantime, though, he is going to defend that real world championship against Samoa Joe, the current Ring of Honor World Television Champion. Now, we know this rivalry goes back, at least like 15 years, I believe. Goes back to the early days of Ring of Honor, back in the Kerry Silken days. And they just it's one of those rivalries that just can't seem to find an end. It's going to continue, but I think the fans are happy about that. Give me your thoughts on Punk versus Joe round 47.
I love it. I love I love these two rivalry. I'm not like as familiar with it. I didn't grow up or like kind of wasn't in tune with ROH when they were there. But to know the journey that both these stars have had in their wrestling careers, and the star power that they pack, and the kind of how complementary they are of one another in the ring. You're just aware of their classic rivalry. But on top of that, they're just stellar on the mic. Their personalities exude through the microphone, but their body presence and their ability to carry themselves in the ring also stands out, above everybody else in a lot of ways. So I'm excited for this match to be on a platform such as Wembley. Like, it's going to be super duper cool. It's kind of cool in a way that Joe has CM Punk's number and it comes with the rivalry. Like, I think CM Punk I think he only beat him in the tournament. Otherwise he got choked out, and Joe has his number. So I think that's such an intriguing aspect. I can only imagine CM Punk is going to go over and win this one, because I don't believe the ROH TV title is on the line here.
No, it is not. Just CM Punk's real world title.
Just his real world title. So I would have to lean towards CM Punk winning the whole thing. But to keep this kind of, it'll be interesting to see how they kind of make this rivalry going. If they'll put a stopgap in and be like, okay, Punk finally got Joe's number. I want to see this happen again at some point, other time down the road too. But I mean, Samoa Joe has been starting off in AEW. I thought he was super underutilized, and almost to the point where they are building him back up to such a prominent role on Collision. I hope they keep that momentum going with Joe. And, honestly, Stu, too, I would love to see him be in a world title program, like the legit world title program. But, I think he had so much value as a star presence and everything like that. It's just like Samoa. I've always been a Samoa Joe fan, and it's pretty cool to see him on this platform at this stage at Wembley with Punk, nonetheless, too. So yeah, probably match I'm mostly excited for, I think, of the weekend.
Yeah, this one's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to be one of those. I think it'll be a love letter to the Ring of Honor fans that had watched it all, going all the way back to '02. I tend to agree. I think Punk's going to retain here because, again, I think we will eventually get Punk versus, and I'm thinking it's going to be Punk MJF again. So, but I think it's going to be a great match. One of the matches that, and I will, full disclosure, I've got AEW Dynamite going on the TV in the studio right now. They just did a deal. So apparently, Swerve Strickland has turned on AR Fox. So
Whoa, really?
heel turn has lasted 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Apparently, he is reuniting with Darby Allin. And it looks like it could be some form of fashion of Darby Allin, Sting, Nick Wayne, and AR Fox against Swerve Strickland, Brian Cage, Luchasaurus, and Christian Cage. Because
Wow.
like all 8 of those individuals came out eventually. And so it looks like they're going to do some sort of match. I don't know if it'll still be a coffin match or if it might just be an 8-man tag. Hopefully they'll confirm it here in the next few minutes, but nevertheless, Sting, first of all, Sting gets to perform in front of 80,000 plus at Wembley Stadium, which is Sting is just about he's been on my all-time favorites. He's for everything he has done, from NWA, Mid-South, WCW, TNA, his brief stint in WWE, and now in AEW. To be able to showcase him at 64 years old in front of 80,000 plus at Wembley, I think is a fitting tribute to his career. Tony Khan said, "I'm not pulling the plug on Sting. He can if he wants to keep going, I'm going to let him keep going." Just give me your thoughts on the icon Sting coming down to that ring in the middle of Wembley Stadium come Sunday.
Man, Stu, I mean, like, Sting, to say he's like the career that he's had, I mean, I completely understand why he's like one of your favorites. And he, like, over the course of my fandom, which is is shorter than yours, obviously, but it's just like I've grown to love him so much. Like, and I'm always rooting for like the veteran quarterbacks and like anything like the old guys. I'm always cheering for. So like Terry Funk was out my alley. Look at what Sting is doing. He's even bringing that to a higher age too, on a bigger stage than what Terry was doing at a certain point. And it's just kind of cool to see him be able to do this. And I'm like, I'm in Tony Khan's boat when he told us that on the conference call. I was like, I feel the same way. I don't want Sting to end it. I want him to keep going as long as he wants to keep going. And it is super, super cool that they're able to give him a proper send off in the way that, a star like him should be handled. And it's cool how they keep him fresh, how he's willing to do a lot of the stuff. And like, I look at when I worked at Whole Foods, there was another older guy that worked at my dad's age that worked at Whole Foods as well. And he would come and work 3 days a week, whatever. But like a big incentive for him was being able to hang with younger people. And like, because that keeps you young. And so seeing Sting be able to do that with the modern talent of today, and then you think about it when Sting's long retired and not actively wrestling anymore, that legacy is going to continue on, like through a Darby Allin or through other people that he's worked with in AEW, and be like, wow, can you believe they work with Sting, the guy that's been like wrestled for that long? So it's going to be cool for him to come out. It's unfortunate that like I don't want to see these kind of swerves kind of happen. No pun intended. I don't want to see these swerves kind of happen this soon, for a show. Because I mean, I was intrigued by the straight up coffin match that these two were going to have, and I really I like what they've been doing with AR Fox as a heel and stuff like that, like wearing the bloody shirt and all that kind of thing. It seems like, are they making? Is Tony Khan calling a quick audible here? What exactly is going on? So I'd like to think. I don't know. It's unfortunate if they're just adding more people, just to add more people to it, because I think Sting deserves all the spotlight he can possibly get, but him being with Darby is great. So I don't. Yeah, it's I wouldn't I like to see this. I haven't watched Dynamite yet, so I can't really tell for that much. But how it all lays out, I hope they're going to keep the focus a lot on Sting and Darby, because I think that was such an intriguing thing. It's unfortunate because I like the pairing of Swerve and AR Fox.
Yeah, that did kind of puzzle me a little bit that they were that way. I don't know if maybe it's a matter of availability, or like you said, maybe Tony just wants to get a few more folks on that all in card, give them that pay-per-view paycheck. We'll see. Like I said, I'm awaiting to see if maybe they confirm it or they make any mention about it. So, but yeah, I want Sting to get that spotlight. I want Sting to get his flowers with 80,000 plus in London cheering him. And
Can I ask you this too? Do you think, what are the odds he gets the biggest pop of the night? Do you think there's a good shot of that, or where do you think that he's going to lie in that regard?
that's a, I don't know if he gets the biggest pop, because you got folks like Will Ospreay and Saraya and Tony Storm. Well, Tony Storm's Australian, but you've got some folks in there that are British. But it's definitely going to be it's going to be a massive pop for sure, because thing. I mean, you talk about our fandoms. I saw Sting live in 1986, I believe. He was still one half of the Blade.
I was one.
He was one half of the Blade Runners. Saw him in Longview, Texas. They were fighting. I think they were fighting Ted DiBiase and may have been Steve Dr. Death Williams. But it was one of the. It was just and like I said, I followed his career. Again, going to Crockett, and then throughout his days in WCW, and then TNA and Impact, and then he finally makes it to WWE, and now here in AEW. I've been lucky enough to interact with him a few times. He's one of the few, kind of like what you mentioned with Terry Funk. He's one of the very few that I was starstruck at.
Yeah.
As again, I've watched him forever, so yeah. I want to see him get all the flowers, and just whatever he wants to do, he's got my support. That's for sure.
100% on that.
Of Will Ospreay, the IWGP United States Heavyweight Champion. Although, did you see a couple weeks ago he swapped it out, got a new belt, and now it's the United Kingdom Heavyweight Championship? Did you see
Is that a sanctioned belt now?
Well, the New Japan website still lists him as United States Heavyweight.
Yeah. So, just a heel move.
Yeah, anyway, he's going to face Chris Jericho. They had the contract signing, which we know how contract signings end up. It was a pull apart, and they were trying to get at each other, and Don Callis was out there stirring up the pot. But this was the match, if I'm not mistaken. This was supposed to be the match for Wrestle Kingdom in 2021 if the Global Bastard had not struck. Right. So now we're getting Chris Jericho and Will Ospreay. Again, this is one of those matches that's just gonna tear the house down, right?
Oh, I absolutely think so. I know people are like, "Oh my gosh, Chris Jericho's shoehorning himself into this like match," and that whole kind of mindset of like, okay, well, hey, I mean, Chris Jericho is a star. He established himself, and he was basically the Terry Funk of AEW. If you think about in comparison to what Terry did to ECW, Chris Jericho did the same thing for AEW starting off. And so, yeah, he's built some equity throughout the course of his career in AEW. And I think, for some reason they didn't necessarily want to do a Kenny Omega versus Osprey here again. So why not put Chris Jericho in this bout where you have somebody like a Will Ospreay, two contrasting styles. Or you have a younger talent that's still on the rise here in Will Ospreay and is considered one of the most athletically talented wrestlers in the ring today. And then you have an established veteran like Chris Jericho. So two guys that are going to be able to tell a story. And I think a lot of the atmosphere, like people think that this card is kind of underwhelming, and I can kind of understand that. But I think when it's all said and done, people are going to be like, dang, this is a really good show. I think the atmosphere is going to be the star of the whole thing. But like, this is going to be one of the matches I think that will not only benefit from the crowd, it's going to benefit from the knowledge of a Chris Jericho. And I think his ability for him and Will to complement one another in the ring with their different styles, because styles make fights, and both these guys are kind of different in a lot of ways. So, but they both have personalities, and that's what's intriguing.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's gonna be a fantastic fight, that's for sure. And then trios action: the Golden Elite, Kenny Omega, Kota Ibushi, Hangman Adam Page, taking on Bullet Club Gold's Jay White, Juice Robinson, along with Konosuke Takeshita. Don Callis will be working around. Yep, this is gonna be that one of those just good old fashioned just beat the snot out of each other for all the technical prowess that is encompassed in this match. I don't think we're going to see too much technical wrestling. It's going to be just as Jim Ross loves to say, it's going to be a good old slobber knocker.
I agree. I think a lot of this, some of the aspect of it, like you think about the Stadium Stampede match with all the men in that one, and then you have this one too as a big multi-man tag match. And Tony Khan even said on our conference call yesterday how he thought it was kind of funny. People were like upset that Kenny's not in a singles match, but here the original one kind of closed out with a multi-man tag match. And so having this match go down, I would have liked to see like maybe Kenny be in a singles match, because you think about, again, the big intrigue I think of the show is going to be the crowd. And so to hear what kind of reaction Kenny would have got in front of a UK crowd like that, I think is a missed opportunity. But circumstances maybe we don't know about is the reason that this match is happening, a multi-man tag match. But yeah, it's going to be a slobber knocker. You definitely want to get those types of stars on the card, like a Hangman and Takeshita and all those other performers as well. So it makes sense, like from a logistics standpoint, but there's a certain aspect that I think that it's going to be missing by Kenny not being in a singles match. I think this match will still be fun. If I had to pick who would maybe win this match, I would say Kenny's team will probably win, but the Golden Elite. Yeah, I think it'll be a fun match. Definitely not up there in regards to how I'm feeling about like on being on the card stuff, but it's still going to be a good match, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. And what you said about a lot of these matches, that crowd is just going to be so hot.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be, it's just going to be crazy. I think they're going to be hot for every match, or at least almost every match. It's going to be something to behold, and I think the crowd will definitely be one of the stars of All In. So it is AEW All In this Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern, noon Central. 0 hour starts at noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, and it will be available on Bleacher Report in the United States and on pay-per-view, many other platforms worldwide. It will come to us from Wembley Stadium in London. Dom, it's gonna be a hell of a show.
It is too. I'm excited for it. I think a big aspect that you don't get too often nowadays in wrestling is that atmosphere. And Wembley is going to be a heck of an atmosphere. And it's kind of crazy because as a kid you would think about what the matches are going to be, and sure, as a what we do today, you still look at that. But like nowadays, I'm like really intrigued by crowds, and so this is going to be exciting.
Couple updates, by the way. So,
okay,
Paul, The coffin match will now be Darby Allin and Sting against Swerve Strickland and Christian Cage.
Okay.
Christian Cage in for AR Fox. And then for the AEW Trios titles, House of Black versus the Acclaimed and the returning Daddy Ass Billy Gunn.
Hell yeah. Okay. All right.
So
yeah, that's great. That's a good booking move there by Tony Khan. You getting you steal Billy Gunn away from all the fans, and now you got him back with like how over the tag team that the Acclaimed is. Putting Billy Gunn back in that element in front of Wembley, it's a great move. So yeah, and adding Christian Cage to that, I think that's great. And it keeps the focus on that.
Mm-hmm. Set up for the following week when Darby Allin faces Luchasaurus for the TNT title at All Out. So
yes,
it'll feed into that. So and then and I got a feeling, I think House of Black drop the titles. I think the Acclaimed and Daddy Ass win the trios titles.
That's a great predictions too. I like that. Now I'll ask you real quick. Do you think there's going to be any surprises, any surprise appearances that we're not expecting?
I think so, just because Tony Khan said there was going to be changes. So he loves surprises.
Oh yeah.
He loves himself some surprises. So let's clear this one for sure. We know Edge won't be there because Edge technically is still under contract with WWE.
Right.
Did say he wrestled his final match, at least in Toronto. But the contract, I believe, runs through September. So we won't see Edge. Who would you want to see as a surprise? Give me a name that
I'll get heat for this one, but I've been a fan since I was a kid. I would love to see Goldberg. I would love to see Goldberg. It's just like, hey, he was the first big wrestler I ever met. I was a sucker for him just because he was just a world beater. Nicest guy you could meet. Loves animals. I love Goldberg, and so I would love Goldberg to show up. And hey, I wouldn't rule that out. Like Tony Khan has teased before. Oh, I've talked to Goldberg and plenty of times, and we have a great relationship and stuff. So yeah, and I think he's been off people's radars lately. I think you will get the negative feedback on social media for having Goldberg there, but the overall grand scheme of things, it's a great move I would think, to have him on the card. So I would love to see Goldberg.
I gotta admit, I think that would be really cool. And you're right, Tony Khan loves tease Goldberg. Of course, he's been busy watching his son play football down in
right Georgia. He signed on. No, Alabama. Roll Tide. Roll Tide.
He's going to be a Crimson Tide.
Yep.
So yeah, which means my Longhorns will just have to beat him up.
You got to do what you got to do, Stu.
But I know I think he's still got his senior year in high school in San Antonio. So, we'll see. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, their school, I know they made a pretty deep run in the playoffs, in Texas high school football playoffs last year. So who knows? Maybe we'll get to see him at state championship in Jerry World. So
my old Gage Goldberg there.
Oh, there you go. There you go. He is Dominic DeAngelo. Follow him on Twitter at Dominic DeAngelo. Catch all of his stuff Inside the Ropes, ad-free shows. How many podcasts are you part of now?
I'm a part of a lot. Primarily, I am part of one. I'm the co-host of One of a Kind with RVD. So that's been fun. We're about to record episode 15 this week. Rob's been awesome. He gives such cool perspective on life, and his view of things are certainly one of a kind. And it's just like, I'm learning a lot just by getting his perspective on things. And I try to adapt that throughout the week of what he talks about, because he gives RVDology basically, which is just like a philosophical thing he touches upon. Like last week was telling the truth, basically. And, it just makes you think in a different way about things. And Rob's got such a unique perspective, and he does not, he's confident in himself, but he's also like perceptive. He knows that he's changed over the years, and how he's kind of, feels better about like certain aspects and learn from himself and stuff. So very cool. It's just it's such a fun podcast. I love doing it. But then I'm also part of Click This. I was actually helping Kevin Nash and Sean Oliver record tonight. I was sitting in on. I produced the Road Dogs podcast. Oh, you didn't know? Funniest podcast you can go if you're just wanting to just yuck it up and laugh. Tune into that podcast. It is so funny. Cassio Kid does a great job. What else do I help? I help with Angle's podcast, Kurt Angle's podcast. I just do videos, and then I help with Arn Anderson's podcast as well. I do his videos too. I might be missing some, but yeah, follow me at Dominic DeAngelo. If you'd like to check out the RVD podcast, go to RVD Pod at RVD Pod. And go to rvdpod.com to go to all of the podcast episodes and clips. And it catches early on Premier Streaming Network too, so you can get the full videos on the Premier Streaming Network every Friday at 4:20 p.m. So there you go, Stu.
Very nice. Such a busy man. By the way, you talked next time you talk with Rob, ask him about discussing mafia lore with George Napolitano at Cauliflower Alley Club in 2018.
Okay, yes. So we have a hidden episode that we never released because we recorded it and we just talked mafia basically the whole time. And like I watched the movie Casino for the first time, so we talked about, you know, and Rob gave me history. We just it was all mobster stuff. So it was like, well, we'll hold off on this in case there's like a rainy day where we can't make it. So I love George. So it'll be great to get. I'll write this down and I'll make sure to ask him tomorrow when we record. So we're supposed to record tomorrow. So
quick story. So I was at Cauliflower Alley Club 2018. It was after something I forget, and it was at the hotel that had a TGI Fridays inside it.
How about that?
So, and I've known George for a few years. George is such a great friend, and Rob Van Dam and his wife came over. And he and George, because George is from Bensonhurst, so he knows a lot of it. And so I'm sitting there, and there's Rob Van Dam and George Napolitano just trading stories about mafia lore. It was fascinating. So
I gotta ask him.
So make sure you ask him, Dominic. So thank you so much, man. All the best to you. We'll talk again soon.
Stu, thank you. You do a great job. It's an honor to be here today on a sad day where Terry Funk passed away. I'm happy you gave me the opportunity to discuss about it with you. So thank you so much.